Hello, everybody. This is Roy Edwards with Capital Presence here to talk to you today about creating metadata and columns within Microsoft SharePoint. So let's go ahead and get started. By now, you should be well aware of how to access SharePoint and SharePoint Online through O365. If you are not aware, and this is your first video and you're just starting in the middle of this introductory campaign we have going on, then you go to office.com at your landing page for all O365. SharePoint is one of the applications in your hub, and it is kind of the hub or starting point for the O365 universe. Also, Microsoft Teams, which we'll go over in another video set. Uh, you only see the sites that you have permissions to within the SharePoint application, and you can favorite them through stars for a future ease of access. So getting started, you'll see two ways to get to SharePoint. First is in the apps on the main page. Second is in the waffle. That's the top left. You'll see a drop down, click on SharePoint. Now that we are in SharePoint, you want to make sure that you are going to the site collection that you want to create this column for the list or library. So we are in Sandbox. You then go into the list or library which you want to create the metadata or the column. You can get to these by going to the site contents if your list or library does not already show up on the left side navigation. So you go into site contents there on the left side, which I have highlighted in the picture here, or you go to the gear. So the gear is always your friend, right? So you go to gear, drop down site contents. If you do not see site contents in the gear or on the left side navigation, this is where I say stop what you're doing, contact your administrator because it looks like you might not have permissions. So choosing a metadata or column to create. We're going to go ahead and do this in the new experience for SharePoint Online. And then on the second half of this, I'll do it through the gear, which is more applicable to the 2010, 2013 environments. So inside the list or library, you can click Add Column. You'll then see a drop down which says single line of text, multiple lines of text, etc. Then you would also see an area More, which I have highlighted red on the side. This would bring up the traditional way of adding a column. So then you would see the field, so on and so forth, in more of the settings site. Alternatively, you can go to the gear. Gear's always your friends. Go to list settings, and then that would bring up uh, the list where you can add list columns and so on and so forth. But we are sticking with the new experience within O365, which is add column. So we're going to click add column. We're going to choose whatever it is that we want, and then it's going to pop up a sidebar pop-up. So again, it needs a name. Just like everything else in the SharePoint universe, it needs a name. So you would name this column whatever it is that you want. I'm going to put testing. Two, and then we will say add a description and then choose the type. So if you chose single line of text in the add column area, you can change it here if you'd like. It's important to note that the name will not be part of the URL. However, it will be called in certain areas like REST API calls or JSON if for the developers out there. Um, but again, if that's not important to you, if you're not looking for developers or anything like that, and you're just going simple, uh, that really doesn't matter. But it is important to keep the name shorter for visual reasons. You don't want to have a run-on sentence; it might get cut off. It's best to think of this like an Excel. This is the top banner area, the title area. So you'll fill this out, and then, like I said, you can change the type. So if you click type, you'll see again the drop down of single line of text, multiple line of text choice, etc. So I can go over these choices with you right now. Single line of text is just what it says. It's a single line of text. It is limited characters. Multiple lines of text, you can choose how many lines you want. I think the default value is 6 lines of text, so you can add a lot more text to that. You can choose plain text, and then you can also choose, I believe, HTML text as well, so you can add pictures and stuff, or bold things, italicize, etc. Number is exactly what it is, a number. You can also make it a percentage. Yes or no is a checkbox. Person or group uses SharePoint permissions and your gal, so you can assign it to people. So that would be a live user data. Date and time is exactly that. It's a calendar choice, and you can set time or you could say just date. A choice is a multiple choice field where you set the choices specific to that column. Hyperlink is a hyperlink. Picture is a picture. Those in 2013 and 2010, I believe, were the same column. So it would say hyperlink or picture in the O365 universe. They are separate. Uh, the last one is currency. So currency is exactly what it says. So these are all the quick adds. If you wanted to add something additional like a lookup field, for instance, you would have to go to the more options uh, in our last step, or you'd have to go into the list settings. In the flyout, you can only add these quick add ones. Is scrolling down on this area, you will find the more options. This is where you would make something, you could enforce unique values throughout the columns. You can make things required, and you could set default values. So now your column exists. You've created it. It is that simple. Columns can be sorted, hidden, or grouped. These are for ease of access. If you want to hide a column, if it's not important to an initial view, which we'll go over view creations in a later video. If it's not essential, you can hide it, but it's important to note that you're only hiding the column on this view of the list, not on the form. The form will still have the column, and if you've made it required, they will have to fill that out before submitting the form. These, like I mentioned before, work similar to Excel columns, and it's important to note that when you create these, there is that button right there that you can see on that picture. It says Export to Excel. If you click Export to Excel, all of these columns that you've created will become the title columns in your Excel sheet. So that is something to keep in mind. Privacy settings on this, you cannot set privacy settings on a column. You can, however, create a targeted audience on a view that will work as sort of a privacy, but there is no way to set permissions or privacy settings on a specific column. Something to keep in mind. So, some more information. If you click on that column that has the drop-down arrow, this is where you'll be able to sort the column ascending to descending. That's the A to Z or Z to A. You'll also be able to filter the column by, if you have a choice, say A, B, and C, you'll be able to filter the column by showing you only the C choices or the B choices. And then there are even more settings. This is where you would edit the column or format the column, which is where I want to go with next. So this is a little bit more advanced, and we'll talk about it in a paid series for developers of SharePoint. But the format this column is how developers can add JSON. This can turn the column green above if it's above or below a certain number, or red if it's above or below a certain number. This is how you format it using JSON. There's a ton of Microsoft references out there for JSON, but we will run through it in one of our future videos. You can also hide the column here. There underneath format column, you'll see hide column. That will hide it from this specific view. So let's go over the gear. The gear is your starting point for all administrative tasks. Like I like to say, it's your friend. So if we go to the gear and we click list or library settings, that will bring up the list settings for this specific area. So this is where you'll see permissions, this is where you'll see forms, this is where you see views. We are focused on columns for this specific video. So under columns, you'll see all of the columns that you have. You can click on any of them and amend them. It's important to note that you can't delete the title, but you can change the name. It will always stay a single line of text, but if you don't like the word title, you want to change it to name or something else, you can. And you would click on the column there and amend it that way. But we're going to create a new column here. And that's under columns, you would click create column. Then it will bring up this new page with a ton of stuff and a lot of reading, right? Don't get overwhelmed. It's actually very simple once you take a look at it. You'll see there at the top the name, the column name. You choose whatever it is, whatever you'd like it to be, the same way as in the flyout. Then all of your choices are there in radial buttons. So you have the same one, single line of text, etc. Also, lookup and a few of the other ones are there. Lookup is a more advanced one where you can pull data from other existing lists. Choosing choice or lookup or really any of these, it will refresh the page. So just be aware that that is going to happen. Don't get scared. It will refresh the page because there are different things that you need to fill out for different pieces of columns. by choosing required, if you select yes, that will require that that column always contains information. You can also set the default value, and you could enforce unique values, etc. So scrolling down this settings, create a columns page, it will really walk you through everything of how to create a column. And now you can work wherever. So now you can store documents and list information, line items, forms, and you can track them through this metadata columns. This is really the kind of the backbone of how you track and how a workflow is assigned to documents or list items. Columns and metadata is really important and is really started getting into the more application development within SharePoint platform. So this is how you would better access those documents, group them, really make it easy to work wherever. So you have a column. That's it. Party on, right? So now you can add views that can sort, view, and display the metadata. And it's important to the situation of the people, right? The people who are using this application. So if you go on and I only care about things that were, if we were doing that choice column C, right? If I'm part of the C team, I only want to see the C's, right? So you can choose different views to say, okay, this view will only show you the C's, this will only show the A, so people don't have to go in and filter them. They would already be pre-filtered. You could also do it through me or today, where you could say, show me only things that are assigned to me. That is part of views, which we'll get into a later video, but this is how you would start in doing that. You can change a column into another type of column, but you are limited to the choices of columns that you can amend. So to break that down, if you have a text field and you want to turn it into a multiple lines of text, you can do that. If you have a text field and you want to turn it into a lookup field, you cannot do that. So it's that quick choice of columns is pretty much what you can uh, seamlessly change back and forth, but the advanced columns you cannot. You would have to create a new column. So before we get into the questions, I'm going to go over and do a live view of this. So I'll go ahead and run through this with you. So here I have my testing list. I will go ahead and add a column here. This is how you do it for the new experience. I'll call this testing 4. This is a test. So the description would appear when filling it out, so you could help people to kind of know why they have to fill that out. Here's the more options where you can say, make it required. I will click yes there. Enforce unique values. I'll leave that no. That will mean that if people put the same information, right? It would help with the text or so on if somebody were to create something that might have already existed. So if you're creating a client item for client, client A, and someone else goes in and tries to create something for client A, it'll give them an error saying that client A already exists. So we'll go ahead and hit save, and now you see column 4. It's as simple as that. You can also go into the gear. We'll go into the list settings. This is the more complicated way of doing this. And we will scroll down to columns. Now I can amend one of these other ones if I wanted to, or I can create a new column. And now it brings you to this page. I'll call this testing 5. And if I wanted to click lookup, now it should refresh. There it is. So we'll scroll down to description. This is also a test. You can require information. I'll click yes. Enforce values. I'll leave it in no. Get information from, this is where you would select the list from. I'm going to use demo list. It'll refresh it again. You can pull over the top the column. So if you wanted to say, okay, I don't want the title, I want it to be pulling from some other else, I'm going to leave it at title. And then we're going to go ahead and click OK, and now our column will exist. So we can get back into the list by clicking the name of the list, and here we are again. So if you didn't see that, I'll go into list settings again. And this is the list settings. You can get back to the list by clicking the name of the list here in the top. That will bring you back to the list. So if we were to create a new form, test, right, test column, testing 3, this was an option, right? This was our lookup field, which we're going to leave this blank. Testing 4, this is another lookup field. So testing 5, we'll choose demo. You can add in attachments to this and then hit save. It'll probably give me an error saying I can't leave those blank. So that's how you do it. It's very simple. And if we wanted to go through and hide this, we could say column settings. We can move it to the left or the right, or we can hide this column. Now I just hid the third testing 3, right? But if I go into here, you can still see that it exists. Again, it only hides it from this view. So that is important to note. If we wanted to change the title, I'm going to rename it. We can call this name of client. And now that's how you would rename it. Now, uh, it's important that you cannot delete the title field. You can or title column rather. You can only rename it. You can't remove it because it is a default column. So that's really it. It's pretty straightforward. As always, if you guys do have any questions, you can always reach out to us. Support at capitalpresence.com, or you can follow us on social media and reach us there at Capital Presence. As always, you can find me at capitalpresence.com and click on my friendly face. It'll give you all of your contact information there. So thanks for watching and look out for the next video. Thanks.